Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special episode of Bugbear High.
Yeah.
My name is John Barlow, and today, on these very special interviews we've been doing over the past couple weeks, we have Danny Hochstatter.
Yeah, John, I like your announcer voice. It's really nice.
You know, I've been working on it so that I don't sound like I'm just a little 15-year-old kid in high school.
Nice. None of us want to sound like a 15-year-old kid unless we're playing one on a podcast.
Exactly.
Which we are.
There's a 10-year age gap between me and my character.
Yeah.
So it's a little odd.
Yeah.
But whatever.
But today we're talking like grown-ups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a grown man. And that is this is how I talk on a regular basis.
Yep.
Danny.
We're also on video. I think it's worth mentioning too because
Hi over there.
Yeah, because we built this beautiful studio and we figured we'd use it.
Somehow we're getting to use this for free today.
Yeah.
Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's great.
Perks of the job, I guess.
Perks the job. Yeah, I did. Well, that's a story for another day.
That's a story for another day. But
I do want to talk about maybe even later in this podcast.
All right.
But for now, we're here at the end of season 2.
We are here. We've finished recording season 2.
Our minds are blown.
And people have heard it.
Yes.
People's minds have been blown.
Yeah.
I've been getting feedback over the past week of people freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. I'm crying.
Yeah.
And literally people are like, why is it raining in my office right now? That is a quote directly from Sam
my
Williamson.
eyeballs. Yep.
And it was a wonderful season 2 recap or season 2 finale, Danny. I honestly was blown away. I had no clue that any of those twists were coming.
That's good.
This won't be any specific spoilers if you're listening to this before the season finale, and I hope you aren't.
Yeah. Do not listen to this first, you monster.
Yeah. If you're trying to do that,
first.
go back and listen to it.
Yeah. What are you doing?
Because I would like to actually talk about some spoilers, okay?
Yeah, sure. No, we're talking about everything. Spoiler alert. All right.
Yeah.
We're going into it.
All right. So, yeah, Danny. When I was talking to Chad and Cody and Kenny about themselves, I just was asking them about themselves to kind of really introduce them to the listeners of the podcast, because we do a lot of talking about our character, but not as much talking about our own personal lives.
Sure.
Like, Danny, who are you? I mean,
oh my goodness,
you've given us some things about yourself.
Yeah.
But I'd like to start with that before we dive really into the season finale. Like,
sure.
Who are you? Why did you come up with all of this? Like, how?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a big question. So it's kind of funny. When I went to, we'll start with Pathfinder, and I think a funny thing about how that all played out was that our friend Jake Elderbrick, who introduced us to the game concept, he talked to me about, like, I do tabletop RPGs. I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, I thought these were myths. I didn't know people still played these.
Yeah.
And I'm
like,
like,
something that was done in the 80s where we're in a deep, dark basement with 12-year-olds.
Yeah, and truth be told, I really feel like this is just the grown-up version of that, where it's like, I feel like way too late as I was aging, when everyone else got tired of playing pretend in the playground, I still loved playing pretend. I loved the good story. I love the adventure and the action. So he says, yeah, we do this. I'm like, that sounds awesome. So went to one, loved it, and I thought, man, I got to find a game around here, but no one was running any games. So I said, well, I guess I'll just have to run one.
Yep.
So I'm like, I'm just going to do it poorly. I don't know the rules. I don't have the rule book even. I just know kind of generally how to do this.
And thank God that Pathfinder has all of their content online for free.
Yeah. Got the beginner's box, and I'm like, great. This is going to run us through the basics of it.
Yep.
Did it. It was awesome. Then we'll try some one-offs. We'll try some homebrews. We'll try some, other PFS content.
Yeah.
And then after a while, we eventually got into a campaign, and we're like, let's buy a book and let's go through this thing. And we went through 2 books of Iron Fang Invasion, which took us like 2 years to get that far.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, which is super fun. And there's still 4 books left to tell. I don't know if we'll ever reboot that, but
one day, if we get to the point where we're making like $1,000 on Patreon every single month, we'll bring it start
back.
Doing Iron Fang Invasion.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun.
Because that group included me, Kenny, and Cody.
Yeah,
and then added on, we have another guy named Ken.
Yep.
Shout out to Ken Kai.
Yep.
You're a great man. We miss playing with you. One day soon we will play again.
Yep.
And then your brother.
Yep.
Cody.
Yep.
So we had 2 Codys and 2 Kens in that group.
I know. What are the chances? The odds of that are just crazy to me.
But that was a great game.
It was super fun. And I think I learned during that time, because even then that time I got a chance to play in a few games as well as GM. And I really just found about myself, I like the GM hat a lot.
Yeah.
Like I really do. It's more fun for me. I think it's like a wonderful mental exercise to say, okay, imagine an entire world in your head full of living and breathing people and societies and systems of economics and politics, and then be every single one of those characters as needed. Have conversations that are improvised from different perspectives, and every conversation is going to affect or change something else in the world, and you have to constantly be adjusting to each of those things. To me, that is so much fun. Like, that's a wild challenge, and it's like it doesn't have to be done perfectly for it to be a fun game.
No, of course.
But like for Bugbear High, I'm like, I want every one of these plot threads to have a satisfying conclusion.
Exactly.
I want every single plot that is presented to you to challenge or mold the character in some way, because I'm not just curious about plot. I really like story. Like I've always, longer than I've ever been a fan of Pathfinder, I've loved good stories. And I'm the type where I really like writing them and thinking about them and analyzing what makes a good book, what makes a good movie, how do characters develop, and why is it satisfying when some do and others don't.
Right.
And I've always really been tied into that. So it's really fun now, like getting to take the format of the tabletop RPG, have a world, figure out how it works, create living, breathing characters, and having a story that can be molded by the players.
Yeah.
Where there's so many times where you guys have presented something in an improv scenario that was not even on my radar, but then I thought, oh, you know what? And I changed my plans based on how you played the game. Like Magnifico was not a central character in the story that I had in my
didn't
head.
you say he was like 100% improviser at the beginning?
He was. Yeah, I had no preconceived notion of who Magnifico was, except he's just one of the weird kids.
Amazing.
Like that's about all I had, and I improvised his description. I improvised his voice.
Really?
Was like, and I had a list of all the kids that I had. Like, here's my short list of like 15 students at Bugbear High. And Morgan said, I want to find the cool kid. And I said, roll. And she got like a 2. So I'm like, I looked at the bottom of my list and said, Magnifico. And all I knew is his name and that he's not very cool. And then when you talk to him, that's what it became. And
that's
all
so
of
good.
that. And even the whole idea of like the rat with the backpack that Kenny introduced, that came back so many times and it was hilarious. There's so many things. And Kendra, again, was just like, it's just Kenny's mom. That's all I knew about it.
Yep.
But then the character of Kendra was born in the improv of how does this play out? And yeah, all these different, and even like Heather Honeypot, like becoming a bridesmaid, like you guys made that happen.
That was entirely Cody.
Yeah, and just like, what's a funny way to, that's now part of the story. Let's work it in there. So,
right.
Yeah, so many things. Chomsky's come back like 2 different times.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like made up I had no idea there was anybody out back. I'm like, well, there has to be a worker. Let's call him Chomsky because it's the first thing that came to mind.
Perfect.
We'll give him a personality, and then we're going to now reincorporate him as part of the story. So it's just fun. It's like I have the big pieces of generally where I want to move things, but how we get there is just it's made of Play-Doh, and it can just be stretched and molded in any way possible to get from here to there. Yeah. So it's just fun. It's just that exploration is fun. Still feeling like I want to tell a story that pays off, but I still want to have that kind of freedom for you guys to affect the outcome of the story, which I think season 2 was what was fun about it was we got to lay out a lot of huge plot points and big things that are happening and story items I was cooking in my head.
Right.
But the things about a season finale is it's got to be more on the rails where there's less freedom on your part.
Yeah, I was listening through it again, and I was like, the amount of talking that us characters actually did was actually minimal. Yeah. Like you did the majority of everything in the last 2 episodes. Yeah. You were talking to yourself a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, and there's even a few times where I almost like cut you guys short because the risk that I run in that scenario is that the more that you guys do add to the story, the less likely it is that my outcome will make sense anymore. Right. So it's like if I allow for too much free, it's a weird balance. And like and it's a thing as a GM where like it's no fun if all you're doing is just I'm forcing you and like ramrodding you into the story that I want to tell. That's no fun. Right. But if I allow so much freedom that my story never really like comes to anything, that's not satisfying either.
Well, then it's almost like a beautiful balance between railroading and sandboxing.
Right.
You literally are just like, you have to walk that line so that, one, your players feel like they have some semblance of free will for their character, but it's also like there is a predetermined destiny for these characters that you are trying to get them to. Right. And now if something happens to them along the way, if one of the characters betrays the other person, or if goes off and does their own thing.
Yeah.
Like at some point, you're going to have to make a decision as the GM.
Right.
Like,
and now it's the question too of like, there's already so much complexity to the world that if we begin adding too many variables, it gets harder and harder to in a satisfying way, pay off each story thread.
which is awesome with what happened with the season finale is you pulled together, you tied up so many loose ends from season 1 and season 2.
Yep.
That it really kind of, we dealt with that problem right near I think it was the end of season 1 where you had too many NPCs.
Yeah.
Where Faith Robertson, shout out to her.
Yes, thank you so much. That list has been very helpful.
Honestly, like she just gave us that entire list of NPCs.
Yeah.
And that helped you actually start to do some stuff for season 2.
Yeah, and helps me not to lose track of things. And so it's a weird balance. And I feel like even a good video game, like there's times where it's like sandbox. Here's your world. Go, take the base any way that you want. You can come in through the air, through sea, through land, through the secret door. You can come in guns blazing. You can come in stealth. Any way you do that. And I love those moments in the show where it's like, hey, get invited to this party. How? I don't know. Go. Just make it happen. You could by land or by sea or by any way you want. Just get in there. And that's really fun when you just open that up or you're at the party, like just mingle at the party. Where? I don't know. Here's some stuff. Go mess around.
Figure it out.
And like the sandboxy moments is where like some of the most fun improv happens. It's where the unexpected happens where I don't even know what's going to happen. And in that situation, I'm like, the only thing that has to happen is this. They just got to get to the office. And once you're in the office, we now narrow our scope. It's not less sandbox. And now we're in a hallway. It's a lot more narrow. Even to the point where I know how it has to end for the plot to progress. Now it's more like a cutscene where it's like, you don't even, you're hands off the stick. Like, I'm going to tell the story for a second. But if I'm only doing that, then I don't want to just sit here and watch Danny tell stories to himself.
Right.
But if it's all sandboxy, we don't have a gratifying story. So just that balance is interesting. Season 2 was a lot more, it definitely wasn't sandbox. It was a little bit more like we're in this hallway. Like you do have to participate in the debates. You do have to have this confrontation and there's a little bit of combat. But even that, I'm like, if the combat goes on too long, what if you throw in a variable that makes it where I have to now change elements of the finale that are connected to season 3 in real time? I'm like, that opens up a lot of risk where I'd love to see what would happen. But I'm less confident I can deliver a satisfying finale if I allow for too much variability. So
you did deliver a very satisfying finale.
That's good. So. Yeah. And that's what I love. And I know now, because that was a moment we spent on the rails, that season 2 is going to begin very sandbox, where it's like we're going to explore and expand the potential of what could happen before we begin saying, okay, these things seem to be where the interest is, and you've laid seeds in this direction. Let's focus in on that story. But I love, like season 2, or season 3, I'm so excited. I've got 2 different ideas for like the way that the season 2 main plot points were like presidential campaign and the Titus and Kendra story. Like those were sort of the 2 main story arcs that we were bouncing back and forth between throughout season 2. The 2 storylines I have in my head for season 3 are so exciting to me, and I'm so pumped about them.
Don't get me too excited because we got more stuff to talk about, Danny.
I know, but all of that to say is like, I have a thought of like, where's the story going? Well, who are the bigger pieces that are happening? We definitely learned a lot more about who is your opponent and what are we up against and what direction are we headed with this thing. And it's cool that we got to learn all that, but it's now a matter of like, now I have to also deliver on those things, create plots that are going to be fun to play around with gratifying endings, introducing these new characters and having Luke, and
I was just gonna ask
Luke,
Danny,
that's crazy.
When did you decide? When did you decide that 1, Kenny's freaking dad was a human? When did you decide that? And 2, when did you freaking decide that the faceless man was Nathan Miller's son from the future?
Those were 2 wild options. So something I learned from Troy LaValle, shout out to GCP. Glass Cannon
right here,
podcast.
Glass Cannon podcast. Check them out if you want more Pathfinder content.
I always felt like he did such a great job with how the Glass Cannon went. And that was really my only exposure to Pathfinder at all when we first started. Like that podcast was all I knew about Pathfinder.
That's what got, both of us and Cody, Chad, Kenny, like all of us, our first main introduction was to Pathfinder was Glass Cannon podcast.
Right. So with that, he had said how he'd tried to write like a series before, thinking about like, if this were a show on Netflix, what would I put in there? And Netflix is like, there's some freedom of like, wow, I have full control over every word and every shot and every detail. Here it's harder because I don't have full control of the show and the story.
Yeah, you're sharing it with 5 other players.
Yeah, but what's going on in the world when you're not there, I do have more control over. So I was thinking about, and something that Troy said was, if you're writing it like a season finale, it's this weird balance between, if I do the thing that everybody expects, then I'll give them exactly what they want, and there will be some payoff in that, but it'll be the obvious answer, where it's like the bad guy wins, or, the good guy wins, the bad guy loses, the end. It's like, well, sure, that's
not as much fun.
That's what we all want, but like how it happens is what really creates the excitement. Or better yet, if something happens that I didn't quite expect, then it's like, oh, it's not happening like I thought it was, but it's still paying off in some ways. So he said, like, the way he thinks about it is, you think about, okay, what would people think? How should the story end? And you think in your mind, this is probably how it would go. And then he says, okay, now throw that aside. Write what's another way the story could end? And then you throw that aside. You think, what's another way the story could end? And he said, you end up going with option like G or H of like,
wow,
like your 10th idea of how can this story play out. And I was just thinking about all the ways about like, man, I think I could see what would be expected, but also what would be very unexpected. So thinking about if Kenny's dad is so yeah, the whole even Kenny's dad story was a big thing. So I had thought for a while about like, man, like, why is Kenny a part of the group? I want to have him bought into why the humans must succeed. Because if it's just, I'm just here hanging around, then it's like, well, I want
at
there to
any
be
given point, if there's something more fun to play with, Kenny's gone.
Yeah, and the same thing of like, if the whole goal here is how do we unite the worlds, and the humans are obviously fighting on behalf of mankind, but Kenny's not. So like, how do we incorporate that somehow? I'm like, man, it'd be cool if he was like a half orc, But then I was like, okay, well, how could he be a half orc? And it's like, well, then Kendra would have had to have mated with a human man. Yeah. But the portal just opened, and I've already made that canon. So now it's like I've boxed myself in a little bit, but I say, okay, how could I make it work? Okay, well, if he was part of a group that tried to reach Mythos before Agnes Hoff did, and with Ignatius the Sensational, how could I make it where he snuck over here before they figured it out publicly? Like, okay, so now different interest group, they find a way over here, he gets sent over here, but then how does that lead to a love story? And you get question after question. You say, okay, well, he was abandoned over here and he was near death, and then we get that whole cutscene about how Kendra finds him, knocks him out, and basically rescues him. But then in that rescue, okay, now we found a way where Kendra and he are stuck together. And while they're in these close quarters and in the middle of this thing, there develops this romance, and then it leads to. Awesome. So then all these different questions come up, and then it's still the question of, all Kenny gave me was my dad's super dead. It's like, well, as far as you know, that's what Mom said. What if that's not the truth? Like Kendra would say, I've just been hiding that. So it's just like you get one question after another. You just start to find ways to say, how would that have been made possible? And is there a more interesting way that could have been made more possible? And who's this faceless man? And
it's ironic that you ended up taking that path, because our original, and I don't think you even knew this, but when we originally built all of our characters in D&D, Kenny's character sheet, whatever program he was using didn't have full orc available. So we had to use a half orc template.
Race. Look at that.
We used a half orc template.
Awesome.
So his literal base build is a half orc. Before all of this was even decided.
Perfect. But that's the beauty of it. It's like the improvisational nature of it. Of like, it actually. So it's an interesting thing, because things have been stated in canon. It actually narrows my options in a way that I enjoy. It's saying it has to fit into these rails. It also has to be exciting and interesting and unexpected, but it still has to work within the canon of the universe. So it's a really interesting and fun challenge. And in the same way, too, it was like, all right, like, I know that there's this idea of there's this Ring of the Lords that talks about how the humans take over the world. So we know that's the historic side of things. We have other people saying, man, what if these humans are bad for the world? And I said, okay, so then the Two World Order is believing that what happened in the past will happen again in the future. What if they had good information that is what happened in the future? And then it'd say, well, it could be someone who's seen the future. I'm like, or it could be somebody from the future. If it's somebody from the future, who's somebody unlikely that could be opposed to these people? Because if you have a faceless man, it can't be like it like in some ways it's like he reveals himself, and who is it? It's some elf. It's like, well, that's not exciting. Like, we've been wondering this since the first episode.
Who is this guy? Like, why?
Like, you just gotta say it's just some guy. Like, no way. It's got. But then you're limited if you say, well, it's only NPCs I've already introduced. Like I could have introduced a new character,
right?
given them a
Like
motive
it could
and
have been
explain
Snyder
that.
from the future or something.
Sure.
Like
yeah.
what? Yeah.
Could have been anything, but I thought who would be somebody very unexpected? And then I thought, okay, well, Nathan not only is not an adult, but he has a son. That son has grown up, that has seen this future, and has come back now to basically kill his father. And I love even the Star Wars parallel of like,
I know
in his mind, he is Luke Skywalker, you are Darth Vader. He's seen the empire you built and thinks, I need to fight Darth Vader. And you think the exact same thing, which is like, that's interesting. You know? And,
it honestly was brilliant to me. And I love, on one hand, I love my refusal to accept the Luke, I am your father.
Yeah.
Like the refusal to accept that was a choice I made in the moment that I stand by every single day, even though other people are saying I should have responded differently. Shout out to Josh Wolper, one of our Patreon subscribers. He said, instead of saying, Luke, I'm your father, he should have said, no, me saw Jar Jar Binks.
Speaking of the unexpected responses.
Yeah, exactly. But unfortunately, Nathan Miller is not quippy.
Yeah.
So.
But it's kind of interesting, too, because even to have said that line would have been you quoting Darth Vader, which he views you as Darth Vader. So it's saying, like, no, I'm not Vader, I'm Luke.
Right. Because Nathan is convinced that he is in his own story. Well, he's not convinced. He's not delusional.
Yeah.
But in his own story, he is the hero.
Yeah.
Like he's
or
not,
at least trying to
or
be.
at least trying to be.
Yeah.
Right. And so he's not, he knows the story of Anakin.
Yep.
He knows Anakin is a hero and then falls.
Yeah.
And he becomes this dark side Darth Vader character that is just like, and I was reading up some stuff on Darth Vader actually over the past day. Yeah. And it's basically about how Darth Vader he wasn't the big bad of the original trilogy. Like Darth Sidious was. Darth Vader was like the guy who did his dirty work. Yeah. He wasn't this dark lord. He was the apprentice. He was basically the Darth Maul to Darth Sidious. Like he wasn't the big bad. He was like the Hound from Game of Thrones. Yeah, sure. Like he just did all he would go.
He was a tool used by somebody else more nefarious.
Exactly. Yeah. So like even though he is the big bad in everyone's mind,
he's terrifying.
But he's also like he's just a fallen hero.
Yeah.
Like
which is actually the story of every villain is actually just the fallen hero. It's
right.
Like where usually that's a Donald Miller thing. He says usually the hero and the villain have the same backstory. Right. Where like they both endured the same trauma or suffering. And how many times did the villain say, you and I are actually more alike than you think. We both did this thing. Join me. You'll see my solution is the one that's going to be right. And the hero says, no, rather than respond in vengeance and in hatred, I'm going to choose to restore the broken thing that made us both. Yeah. And I'm going to fix it instead of condemn it or judge it or burn it. I'm actually going to heal it and find a way to bring it back to what it always should have been. And even though it hurt me like it hurt you, I'm going to choose a different path. So it's very interesting that like, even as Luke talks about how, you know, you as an absent father, you just sat me in front of Star Wars and said, there you go, kid. And that was your parenting style. Right. It's like, that's what your parents did to you.
Yeah, that's
so
what happened to Nathan. Like his aunt and uncle literally like they sat him in front of Star Wars and then he just taught himself everything he knows from then on.
Yeah, which is like, awesome because now you and Luke have the same backstory.
And Nathan is choosing now, even though he is the Darth Vader of Luke's story, he's choosing now to not be because he's been confronted with that future. Yeah. It's like, in a sense, Luke has become successful. He's killed the father that he knows.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know?
Super weird. Yeah. Oh, gosh. I just love the complexity of it. So this is a fun thing, too, is like, I'm also trying to be conscious of like...
Sorry. Okay. Before you move on. He's killed the father that he knows, but Luke has now become the Darth Vader of Nathan's story.
Right. Right.
So he's switched places with his own father.
Yeah. Just depends on whose story is being told.
Yeah.
You know? And
that's why I love this freaking story so much.
And that's what I'm saying is like, as far as a payoff ending and coming up with what's these new plot points and how does this play in and thinking about, you know, what kind of villain or challenge is going to draw out most of these characters and thinking about in this story, you have a son who hates you for things that you did but haven't done yet. and then thinking about, and then you actually also understand him and empathize with him in a big way. But you know that what he's doing is wrong. But also, do you? Is he actually doing the right thing? Maybe I am the bad guy.
That's at the end of the episode. Where I was thinking, like, wow, we're losing.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments of the whole episode. Was just being like, we're losing, and being like, maybe that's part of what changes this. And yeah, the whole thing was, I loved that. That was great. But but all that to say, it's like, again, I love good stories, and I'm thinking about what kind of challenge isn't just going to be a cool plot point, but is actually going to draw out something important from the characters. Yeah. So I think, and that's what I love too about Kenny's dad being in there as well, about being like, wow, it would be emotionally devastating to have to fight your own father, especially when he loves his son, but knows he must kill him. So then it's just like Kenny being like, do I have to kill my dad? Like, because if that's what it takes, I guess I got to do it. But then a dad who's very motivated to say, despite my love for you, there's more at stake than this. And it's like, man, that just creates this drama and this tension between you and your opposition. And that's more interesting than just, it's a ogre. You know, it's just some ogre. There it is.
It's just whatever.
Like, this is more fun. It's what makes the fight matter. So I feel like we've done a really good job paying off Luke's story, or Nathan's story, and Kenny's story now with the half-orc thing. His dad's involved there.
You got to do some work with him, Bino, and Mitch.
And we had some, definitely. And I've got very fun things in mind for both of them. But even with Missy too, we had some really fun ideas in that direction. But then it was like, pivot. You know, like life has changed dramatically for Morgan as it has for most of us.
Well, that's where we're gonna just roll right into the other things I wanted to talk about. What happened in the real world that actually like kind of shifted things with this season 2?
Huge stuff. Yeah. And even that of you know, I think everybody knows that like the biggest enemy to any tabletop RPG group is scheduling conferences or scheduling conflicts. Yes. Is like that's 100%. The main reason why games stop.
It is the main BBEG.
Yeah, if we all had nothing but time and we could just come together and we had no other responsibilities, like we'd be doing this 6 hours a day.
Yeah, we'd release an episode every day of the week.
Every day, yeah,
which would be great.
Yeah. But it's just, the complexities of life and things change. And that's the thing, is not like, we're not all just like kids going to school, coming back and having all this time after school. It's like, we're adults. Like, babies have been born since we've begun this podcast, and pets have been added to families, and jobs have changed, moves out of state. Like, these are huge.
Chad has moved all over the country. Yeah. Cody has moved all over the country. Kenny has moved all over the country.
And then came back.
Morgan's mother has passed, and she has had some other losses.
Yeah.
And
job changes and relocations and all sorts of stuff.
I've changed jobs, and me and my wife are expecting a child.
Yeah,
so
big
we
changes.
have a lot of things going with this group. Danny, you yourself have been building this building that we are in.
Yeah, like, ridiculous.
There's a lot going on.
It's been a lot. So like it's the kind of thing where this is a fun thing to do, but the question is this more important than everything else in our life? Or if there is no margin for it, does it just have to be set aside? And from Morgan in her position was just saying, this right now is keeping me from actually pressing into my season, doing what I have to do for my own health and well-being, fully adjusting into this new season of life. And it was great for when it was, but it has to end. And then it comes to this thing with the show of like, well, then is the show over? Does it continue? Where does that fall? And it's really the matter of like, first and foremost, Morgan's our friend.
Right.
We care about her. We've known her long before there was ever a Bugbear High. She was not some actress we found on Craigslist. Like, you know, we care about her, and we struggled in a lot of the same ways too. Like the loss of her mother was hard on us too, because we knew her mother very well.
Yeah, we're in a very close knit community, and that ended up happening. It hurt. There was like 200 people there.
Yeah,
at
it was huge.
Funeral. It was crazy.
And like we helped to host it, and I ran live stream for it because we wanted people to be a part of it, and I had to help lead a lot of people through that. So there's just been a lot of things like that where we understand the difficulty of it. That's huge. And this show is great, but it's not the most important thing in our lives. No. And, our children and our families matter a lot. and it's just a matter of saying like, hey, do we stop the podcast? We don't want to do that. No. So let's find a way to say, okay, we can all come to terms, look at reality and say, this is just the right move for Morgan Green right now. Yeah. And we're going to move on. And we're going to find a way to honor her in the show. And I loved how that last episode played out, where like we got the time in the front. I loved that. I was almost kind of sad that I'm like, like the way that it shook out. I tried thinking about a couple different ways of like, can it be a hero sacrifice? I kind of like the idea of there being open-ended things, but then there's also like, what's the unexpected thing? And I don't want to shoehorn it. And there's all these different, restrictions on it.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I think we have to play it where if Morgan's just if she's just been dead for a while, that explains her behavior over the last several, episodes.
Being totally unpresent, like all that stuff. Like I think it was the last 8 episodes of season 2.
Yeah.
We had no Morgan. Whatsoever. She was officially done.
Yeah.
We got her to come back for a half hour so that we could actually do our intro send off, and she recorded a couple things that we used in the back half of that of the season finale, where her voice was there, but she couldn't be there in present.
Yeah. So even with that, like that's
and we also didn't even have Chad for that episode as well,
right?
Because scheduling, like he was moving across the country, and there was nothing we could do about that.
Yeah, and my theater background knows the show must go on.
Yeah,
like if it can go on, it must go on.
Right.
So that's been the plan of how do we honor people, how do we make things happen, and how do we just keep progressing somehow.
Right.
Because the show and the story matters. We want, as you being our audience, we want to make sure that we're still able to deliver good content, that it's still gratifying and fun, that we're maintaining a quality standard, and moving forward. So now we get into this question too of like, now do we replace Morgan and do we find someone else to fill that shoe? Do we carry on with the cast we have? So is it a recasting thing? Is it, like what happens with all this? And truth be told, we don't really know yet.
We're still kind of figuring that out.
We're going to kind of be exploring a couple different things because I know the story and I want it to progress, and we can always add to it. We can keep it with what we have. But we really want to take some time to think about that and make sure as we move into season 3, because I have such exciting and fun and big plans for where the story's going. That it's no matter what, the story must continue to be told. It's so fun. It's such a hobby and a passion, and like it's the best. It's one of the most intricate, and I don't know, of all the things I've made in my life, I'm very, very proud of this show. It took a lot of work, a lot of creativity, a lot of teamwork.
Has been amazing.
It's been really fun. So the point is, how can we then just keep it going, keep creating content, which kind of leads to now being at the end of season 2. And moving into season 3 of what's our strategy for that.
Right. We never actually took a break between season 1 and season 2.
We talked about it, but we
talked about doing it, and we were like, no, I think we should just keep going every 2 weeks and just go from there
as best we can.
And we just switched systems from D&D 5e to Pathfinder 1e.
Yep.
We won't be switching systems again, I promise. We will be taking a break. What we've discussed is basically due to, 1, our busy schedules, and 2, just the lack of marketing on our end, what we would like to do is try and relaunch the show.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do is basically move it from its bi-weekly release schedule every other Monday to every Monday.
Yeah.
And what we'll do is we will move all of our current content onto Patreon so that everyone that loves it right now, you're trying to listen through it, you can go and listen to it at our $5 The Kenny tier.
Yeah.
And
the worst one.
It's not the worst one.
The smallest one.
It's the smallest one, but without him we wouldn't
popular.
be live.
Also the most popular tier.
Yep.
That's right.
And you can listen to it at the $5 tier. You'll be able to listen to everything season 1 through season 2 and all of our bonus content as well as our uncut material. And what we'll do is we'll start releasing all of those episodes in public again, starting January 1st. Every Monday, season 1, episode 1, all the way through the end of season 2 finale. We'll release all of that every single week. And then once that is finished, we'll drop the recap again. And then we will move forward and we'll start releasing season 3 sometime September next year. We'll have the exact release date of episode 1 of season 3 will be dropping sometime mid to late next year.
Yeah, we'll keep it going as soon as we can, and it's the same thing too. The reason why we like the idea of a break between season 1 and season 2 is because of all these crazy life transitions. It's huge. There's just a ton of stuff going on. It'd be nice to have pauses, especially going into the holidays now.
Yeah.
There's big stuff. And the thought of taking down the show and relaunching it was one that we weighed very heavily because we know that, for all of you listening that have followed with us so far, we didn't want to make it where now we're removing all of the content. You don't have access to it. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure you still have access to it as it is. once we begin making and releasing season 3 content, we want to make sure you're the first people to have access to it. And hopefully you don't have to wait until September of next year to get access to it. But we wanted to say of like, if we relaunch the show at a weekly level, that gets us about 35 some weeks of content that is pre-scheduled. That gives us 35 weeks to basically finish season 3 and then release it on that same weekly schedule and hopefully maintain it going forward after that.
Right. And while those are releasing automatically as we go, we can be recording everything, and that allows us to put more time and effort into actually marketing the show properly.
Yeah.
So that I can reach more people.
Yep. Because right now, with the small group that's followed us this far, we're so thrilled that every single person that's found this show loves it like they do.
Like, honestly, right now, shout out to Cameron Johnson, Faith Robertson Caffey, and Josh Wolper, our 3 Patreon subscribers right now.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much for supporting us monetarily every single month. It is so appreciated.
Yep.
Seriously.
It's been huge. That's awesome. And like, we're so excited to continue making this stuff. And as much as we love and appreciate everyone who's been with us this far, it'd be cool if we had like, I don't know, a couple thousand more people that were listening to the show.
Yeah.
And while like the bi-weekly release, we don't think that's been the only reason why it hasn't gotten out there. I'm sure there's more we could be doing on the marketing side, but we know that a weekly release would increase our chances of getting this thing going. It'd look better on the algorithms for podcasts. It'd allow us to kind of reintroduce everything as a newness to it, create a more consistent release strategy, and allows us to kind of freshen up some content. And there's all things like that while it's sad to kind of have to like start over, we know we can do it better, and we can hopefully just expand the audience. Because even if it's, it's cool if we only reach this many people, but if it could be, bigger, then there's more people and a larger community of people that are all a part of this story and connecting on it and getting to share in it, then that's awesome. And that's really, as much as we love it, we'd probably still do this even if it was just for ourselves.
Oh, of course.
But the chance to share it with more people, it's like, wow, it'd be kind of a setback to start over. But if it helps us get the story out to more people, I think it's our best move right now.
Right.
So we're going to go for that and find ways to continue releasing new podcasts and giving early access to our existing fan base.
Right. I believe, and this is specifically to the people that will be subscribing to Patreon, our goal is to release the season 3, episode 1, 2, 3, and so on as we record them as uncut content.
Yep.
So as soon as we start recording them, we can drop them almost immediately when we do that. We'll probably give you an exact release date. They probably won't be perfectly timed just because scheduling.
Yeah.
But the public launch for season 3 will probably be mid to late next year, but the private Patreon content launch will probably be sometime early-ish, late first quarter of next year.
We'll see. Yeah, because to kind of loop all the way back around to where we started and just talking about, who's Danny Hochstatter personally and everything, like, and talking about the difficulties of life. Going back to the beginning to weirdo, chubby kid with no social skills most of my life. Got into theater around 8 years old, and then football after that, and then into science was about the only subject I did well at was science and theater throughout school. So then went to pre-med in college to go study biomedical science. So I got my undergrad in that, obviously, while also doing a boy band and acting gigs on the side throughout college and music stuff. Then after college, realized I don't want to be a doctor. I see people that love it, and I'm not one of them. I'm good enough at it, and I can do it, but it doesn't excite me. Right. Like I see it exciting some of my other classmates. So it must be something else. So then there was a year where I did more music, more acting, more video stuff. Video kind of started picking up. So then I became a videographer for like 10 years. Actually, that first led to a job at a church where I learned how to do a lot of video and marketing and production side of stuff. And then it led to working with my family business and then working with your family business. Yeah. And then now at the end of it all, the way all of this is shaken out, after being a freelance videographer and kind of content creator for the last like 10 years or so, for the last 2 years, I've been running a church, which is crazy. And
the pastor who is also a GM.
Yeah. Kenny and I like calling it Dungeon Pastor.
Hey.
Which is just too weird words stuck together that if you really think about it, they don't make much sense. And it's something that I haven't talked about on the show up till now because I didn't want it to be a distraction for people.
Yeah.
Where it's a couple things where sometimes the podcast listeners might be like, what, you're a pastor? That's weird to me. But there's also a lot of church people that are like, wait, you do a tabletop RPG podcast? That's weird to me.
Yeah.
And it's just this weird fusion of who is Danny Hochstatter? I don't know, somewhere between these two things where, I lead a church because I love Jesus. I believe he is the savior of the world. I believe that he transforms lives like he transforms mine. I run this church because I see it happen every single Sunday, and I truly believe that it is the best way to get through life. I do believe that that he created us and that the best way to live our lives is to do what he told us to do in this thing called the Bible. Yeah. I believe he's still alive and speaks to us through his spirit and that we can communicate with him and he can lead us and guide us. And already in saying all these things, there may be podcast listeners cringing out there being like, oh, so you're a weirdo. It's like, no, here's the thing. I never wanted those two things to bother either audience.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the way that I would explain it is like, when it comes to the nature of this podcast and what we're talking about, like there's some naughty words and you did this birthday party that had underage drinking in it, with weird magical drugs, like why are these things part of a story that a pastor is telling? It's like, and because my answer to that is that while I do believe that Jesus is the best way and the Christian lifestyle is the one that is going to be the most satisfying to everybody and the most fruitful, it's also the case where that's not really what real life looks like. You can't really tell a good story where at the beginning of the story, everyone is shiny and polished and clean and perfect and saved and Christian. And at the end of the story, they're all exactly the same way. It's like, that doesn't really work. If you're going to do something that looks like real life, they talk differently, they think differently, they behave differently.
They say bad words.
Yeah, you know, so even in all of this, it's like, I wanted to tell a story that's reflective of something that would look like a real high school. And in my real high school, there was things way worse than what we've talked about in this show that were...
the stuff we haven't touched on that happens in high school.
This is still...
Be glad this is all we've touched on.
Yeah, we're still doing our best to keep it a PG-13. But just even the nature of that, of saying... that if there was content that didn't seem very pastoral that was discussed, and even things that the characters that I've played, the characters themselves are not pastors of churches. They're real life characters in this, made up characters in this made up world of mythos. But saying, okay, I want to talk and think like they do, not like I do. Right. Because if I only did characters that look and sound and think like me, we're gonna have a very boring show. Yep. So I wanted that to always be a part of the storytelling process. So I never wanted to be the faith side of things to be a hindrance for the listeners, but I never wanted the listeners, but I never wanted the show to be a hindrance for the church people.
Right. You don't want those two things to start bashing at each other.
Yeah, and they're never really the same context anyway. So all that to say, it's the kind of thing where even the stories that we're trying to tell, I think also, like, God is the best storyteller. Like, he's the author. So it's the kind of thing that, me as part of what I'm doing as the GM is trying to be that kind of same author where I want to tell stories that are redemptive, that are interesting, where the best of mankind can come out of it. And I even think about it too, if like other people say the question of like, is God in control or are we in control? I'm like, really? Pathfinder's the best way I can explain it to people, where it's like God's more of our GM, where he has a story that he has kind of prepared for us. And if we do what the GM's telling us to do, we're going to be led on the adventure of a lifetime, where we're going to receive rewards, we're going to level up, we're going to grow, we're going to improve, we're going to have great stories along the way. But also, at any point as a player, I can say, I don't want to do what the GM's pushing me towards. I'm going to go hard left. And he'll say, all right, well, we'll just change the story. Like, we'll adjust
that. We'll improvise and bring out a whole new
And I still have an end conclusion in mind that I'm trying to lead and guide you towards, but you also have freedom as the player to be a part of that story. So and it's kind of funny where in many ways, like, I don't see it as the case where it was definitely the case with like the D&D in the 70s community. There was the whole satanic panic thing. And Pathfinder, I think, even has like a module called Satanic Panic. Yeah. That's all in this demon world. And there's some, even in the Pathfinder subject matter, there's definitely some hellish evil things.
Right. But you're meant to fight that stuff.
Right. It's got to be there as opposition. And if there's only good guys doing good things, you don't have a story.
Yeah.
So, it's in the stories I'm telling, I'm avoiding those things because I don't want to do anything crazy, hellish, and demonic and try and that's not a mindset I want to be in. That's not interesting to me. I'd rather have real people with real motivations. Like even the fact of it's It's not some evil hell monster that's trying to destroy all humans. It's like, well, that's okay. You're just another
the
big
faceless man very easily could have been a demon.
He
but
could have
he's
been
not.
anybody.
He's
Yeah,
he's an interesting character who just so happens to be my character's son.
Yeah, and if you just beat up this irredeemable monster, then it's like, all right, fine. But it's like, but if it's a real person, now we actually have to get into the intricacies of human nature, and overcome some real interesting moral dilemmas and see what that does to the hearts of the characters and how that changes things. So, bit of a detour in terms of subject matter, but I think it's important to talk about because, again, to figure out who is Danny Hochstatter. If you want to know that question, Danny is a videographer, a pastor, a boy band musician. Like, he's a lot of things, and a dungeon master. So, out of all these things, it's just I don't.
And the dad of 3 children.
And yes, and I have a 5-year-old and who just turned 5, and then 2.5-year-old twins, boy-girl twins. So in the middle of all of these things, I still find time to play this game because I love it. It's fun. It's a hobby. I think these stories are valuable, and I think that in the same way that you could read the Bible and there's some good stories in it, but it's like the things that really change people, move people, grow people are good stories. Yeah. So by playing Pathfinder is a way to like walk out these stories. Say, okay, imagine that you have an NPC and this is their worldview, their ethics, their systems of belief. How does it play out in the context of a story? And it's a fun way to kind of just like explore the humanity and mindsets and psychology in this kind of live, what's the word I'm thinking of it? Like a simulation. Yeah. Like I'm going to simulate what this kind of mindset would look like if it were played out in an environment that's made up of, imaginary people. Yeah. So all that to say, that's kind of where that comes from. And part of the reason why we even talked about a break between season 2, season 3 is like, our church has grown tremendously since we've been running it. I run it with my wife, so we do that together. And we, co-pastor this church, non-denominational Christian church in the Midwest. Yeah. And we've grown the church tremendously, about 50 or 60%. And we just got a new building, and we're learning about maintenance for that building, and we're trying to get involved in our local government and kind of be active in the community. Yeah. So it's like on top of that, and on top of video work on the side, and helping philosophy courses getting produced in this studio, and all these other things, and then having my own side projects of books that I'm trying to get published, and other things like that. Dude. There's also this, and a family of 5, with my 3 kids. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and big families on both sides. There's also this podcast. So. Yeah. It's the kind of thing where there's a lot of pieces and complexity to life. So even this of saying, hey, we're going to kind of pause between season 2 and season 3, recollect, regather, re-strategize, and try again. It's sad to kind of take those pauses, but also it's sort of, in some ways, just a necessary move in order to sustain it. Right. So while it's kind of sad to say we have to pause, if we don't pause, we might not be able to actually continue it. And even if we did, we might be doing it poorly, and we'd rather not do it poorly.
Yeah, and we don't want to try and stuff in a bunch of recording sessions into the last couple weeks of this year so we can give you season 3 at January 1st. Yeah. Honestly, you'd probably only get me, Kenny, and Danny.
Yeah. And we can shoehorn some goofy content in there. It's but to do the story justice, season 2, I think, ramped up the odds, the stakes, the intensity of the story.
Oh, yeah. And the amount of scheduling conflicts we had to dodge for season 2 alone. Oh, yeah. That brought out the funniest content, especially when Morgan was there for one session and then Chad was there for the next session.
You're right.
And they flip-flopped. And so Morgan took credit for all of the stuff Chad did. Yeah. That was brilliant because we literally just didn't have one in the other one. But it was
also a necessary in-game way to justify really real and difficult scheduling conflicts. Yeah. So that's kind of the point of the whole thing. Is we can kind of just keep pressing through with whatever we got and just make it work, or we can pause for a second, recollect, grow the audience, be more intentional about this, take our time planning for season 3, playing around with some recasting ideas, making sure we don't just throw someone in there and run, but let's take our time and make sure it's really if there's a good fit, or even if we need an extra person, or if we do guest stars, and have that be a thing going forward. It's necessary, I think, to really do the show justice and move forward with that same quality content.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, let's just say, what are we doing, Danny? We need them to follow us on Patreon if you still want access to season 1 and season 2 by the end of the year.
At a time to be discussed, Patreon will be the only way to probably access
season 1 and season 2 until they release publicly throughout every single week of next year. Yep. That'll be Patreon $5 tier.
Yep.
And once season 1, episode 1 of Bugbear High drops at the first Monday of January. I don't remember the exact date right now.
Yep.
But when that drops, share it with your friends.
Yeah.
Go send it to everybody
and
actually get the word out, because we want this thing to start picking up. We're going to do our own marketing on our end, but the best way to spread the word is tell your friends.
Yeah.
Like, word of mouth is the best way that these things spread.
It really is. And if you've been listening with us this far, like the reason why we're doing this and the reason why we're actually having to take the step back, we'd love to just keep going as is, but it's like, we want people to hear this. You know, we want people to know about it. We've gotten this far because it's good and it's fun and it's exciting. And if we just keep it to ourselves, it's like, well, if we can keep going, what if we just finished everything with the same listeners we had today? That would kind of be fun for us, but kind of sad, if we pause, what if we can get another 3,000 people on this journey with us? What if we can get 10,000? What if we can get 100,000? And then this becomes, like a household name or something that a lot of people are a part of. And, it's not about the money. Clearly, it's not about the money. We've never, Patreon is barely paying for our couple expenses that we have. None of us have profited from this. If anything, this is something that should be cut first so that we can get on with the rest of our lives and all of our other important things. But we care about it so much. Like, we want to find a way to continue it, and we want to share the story with more people. So please talk about it. Share it on group chats. If you talk about it over Christmas dinner with somebody.
And your next Pathfinder session you're sitting at.
Hey, you never heard of D&D, never heard of Pathfinder. Like, hey, we'll have this podcast. I'll introduce the concept and listen to a couple of them. Maybe we'll play a session, because that's kind of what it feels like. And you've heard enough content now to know how
introducing people to Pathfinder and D&D is like one of my favorite things to do.
It's the best.
Seriously, it's so much fun.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of stuff we could do. We even talked about writing our own one-offs in the Bugbear High universe to give out and say you can run this Bugbear High content, with your family,
one day,
or friends, whatever.
So much fun.
Yeah, it'd be super fun. We toyed around even with simplified game systems where you could just kind of hop in and run with these things. But anyways, all that to say, thank you for listening with us so far. We're so glad this really is it's a passion project for us. Yeah. It's something we do because we just love it. And this story, we're all very proud of it. We've all put a lot of hard work into it, carved out a lot of time to make it happen. And we're so glad that you guys enjoy it as much as we do. We're just hoping that it can grow, that we can double down, make some incredible content for season 3. We desperately want to continue this story. I just re-listened to the finale today and was like, what happens next?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, it's up to me what happens next. But I got so fired up about where it kind of goes from here. And I love already the idea, the way that I was excited about the whole Titus story arc of the idea of your mom is dating a guy who's a literal monster and eats people alive, and your mom is insistent that it go through. So you have to find a way to break it up without betraying your mom, maintain the relationship. You can't outright murder the guy, at least not yet. And also then just the sandbox of just, you're at a wedding, ruin this thing. That is my favorite sandbox prompt I have ever given as a GM. It's just stop the wedding. What a fun little objective title to see at the top of your screen.
I love one of the titles of the Wedding Crashers, part 1 through 5. Was Revenge of the Ring Bear.
Yeah,
it was so good.
What a title! Oh my gosh, never heard that one before.
It was so good.
Yeah. So I have ideas for season 3 that I think are just going to be so fun, and all these ways to do it, and even just the stakes raising with all these things about what just happened at school changes the school dynamic. What happened with getting Hank and Kendra? Who
won the presidential election?
Right. We'll find out, and having having Kendra and Hank and Howitzer in the van with you at the end is being okay, we have allies who are active now. They're not just our friends that'll be there if we need them, but it's we
Nick
are now
Fury's
in the fight.
The field now.
Yeah, it's you're growing your team because you need to mount an actual offensive because they have mounted their first attack, and it's really they're ramping up. So now the opposition has to now rise to meet that. Right. And what does that look like? And how does it play? What's the new battlefield? And how are we going to get Magnifico out of prison with this serpent face fake? What do we do?
Fake Missy.
Yeah, it's and also where's Missy? What happened to her?
She's dead.
There's so many things that I cannot wait to tie up. What do we do? These prophecy things. Who is this golden man?
And do we get another player?
Right.
At the table? What's happening here, Danny?
It's just all these things. I'm so excited to kind of deliver on every single one of these things. but we want to make sure we do it right. We want to make sure we do it with the right cast. We want to make sure we do it with the right strategy. And hopefully by the time that the relaunch show catches up to this point, we have thousands more listeners along with us freaking out about season 2 finale like we did, and then we'll just progress on from there. So
awesome.
Anyways, thanks for kind of being on the journey with us. We apologize if it's a delay for some, but we promise it is in service of making excellent content and carrying on this story that we've done and really doing it justice. So thank you for being with us so far. This has been a blast.
Yeah. And last but not least, just a quick shout out again to our Patreon subscribers, Josh, Faith, Cameron, and all of the people who have left us a review on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
Seriously, thank you all. We've gotten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different reviews. And let's get more.
Let's get more.
Share us with your friends on there as well. Have them leave us a review. Take your friend's phone, leave a review for us on there.
Hack somebody's
seriously,
account.
it helps us actually reach more people. And then follow us on Instagram. And we haven't posted anything on X either, but I think we'll get to that at some point.
And that's even the other thing is, having all this time, we know now what happens in season 1 and 2. We can create content around those things. If it's art, if it's, songs or silly stories or whatever, we can actually begin to promote these things ahead of time.
Yeah. And if you make fan art, send us some stuff of the characters. We want to see what you have in mind for what our characters look like. Because honestly, we still need to get some made.
Yeah.
Like official character art for each one of these characters would be awesome.
Yeah, it would be super cool. Well, anyways, that's it for today. But we're very excited to bring season 3. We're very excited about everything that happened in season 2. My mind's still blown about it. I can't, and that's still the hardest thing about being the GM for this game is I want to tell everybody, guys, this is what I'm thinking for season 3, and I can tell nobody, and it's the worst because I'm just sitting on these ideas, and I love all of them. And I can't tell anybody. I have like one secret content that I'll talk to about it, being like, hey, we're going to go back and forth about this. Tell me everything you think because you're the only person I can talk to.
Oh, no.
And I'm not releasing my contact. But anyways, it's fun to know. No, we're keeping that under wraps, baby.
I need to find out who this is.
No, can't do it. Secret. Super secret. Yep.
All right, guys. Well, have an awesome day, and may the force be with you.
There you go. We'll leave it with that. Go Bugbear High. See ya.